There's no way it could possibly have been a defense to murdering your children.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all.
Do whatever you want. I would kill you.
I'm innocent. You all, you're garbage.
In the realm of crime and disturbing murder cases, bone-chilling stories of mothers who willingly ended the lives of their children send shockwaves through society.
Everybody want to know, yes, I did kill her!
These women, who should embody the essence of love, care, and protection, have instead become the architects of their children's darkest nightmares, betraying the very lives they were meant to nurture. Why did they commit such an unthinkable crime?
May 25th is actually the day she died. Well, the day I killed her.
Join us as we witness the most evil mothers reacting to life sentences. Mitchell Blair. Michelle had been fixated on the inside of her prison door for what felt like hours, awaiting the moment it would swing open on the day of her court verdict. Michelle Blair, a mother from Detroit, Michigan, became a chilling symbol of heartlessness and cruelty at 2015. Blair was convicted for the brutal murder of two of her children, Stoney Blair and Stephen Barry. The discovery of the children's bodies, stuffed in a freezer in Blair's home, sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. Her actions were horrific, but it was her reaction in court that left many utterly speechless. When Blair stood before Judge Dana Hathaway in the Wayne County Circuit Court, the room was tense with anticipation. Everyone expected remorse or at least a semblance of regret. Instead, Blair's demeanor was cold and unyielding. She showed no sign of sorrow or guilt. In fact, Blair openly admitted to torturing and killing her children, 13-year-old Stoney and 9-year-old Stephen, claiming they had sexually abused her youngest son. She alleged that her youngest son told her Stephen played with him genitals. So out of anger, she started torturing him in August 2012. She poured hot water on Stephen's genitals and forced him to drink Windex before strangling him with a belt. Almost 9 months after the killing of Stephen, Blair reportedly killed her daughter Stoney after she told her that she did not like her siblings. Mitchell Blair strangled her with a black t-shirt and suffocated her with a plastic bag. Her act would have been swept under the rug if she was employed and financially stable. However, this case came to light in March 2015 when Blair received an eviction notice for failure to pay her rent. So she left her apartment. When the crew of the 36th District Court arrived to clear the apartment on March 24, 2015, they found two bodies in a white freezer. The first was Stoney, wrapped in a blanket, and underneath her they found Stephen wrapped in a plastic wrapper. This discovery earned her the name Freezer Mum. Throughout the trial, Blair's behavior was marked by a disturbing lack of empathy. She recounted the gruesome details of her crimes with a matter-of-fact tone, almost as if she were discussing a mundane household chore. This lack of remorse was compounded by her confrontational attitude towards the judge and prosecutors. Blair repeatedly interrupted proceedings, showing disdain for the court's authority and the gravity of her situation. Her reactions were not just shocking, they were a stark reminder of the capacity for human cruelty. And if you are wondering the kind of sentencing she got, well, she got a befitting life sentencing with the possibility of parole. Crystal Candelario. On the 6th of June, 2023, Crystal Candelario, a 32-year-old mother of two, left her 16-month-old daughter Jaylyn alone and unattended at their home near Lorraine Avenue and West 97th Street in Cleveland, Ohio. Crystal did not return home until June 16, 2023, a full 10 days later. When Crystal finally returned home, she found Jaylyn unresponsive and immediately called the police, acting as though the baby just suddenly became unconscious. But when the crime scene investigation and autopsy results came in, it revealed that Crystal's initial account of the events did not align with the physical evidence. The autopsy showed that Jaylyn had died from dehydration and malnutrition, likely due to being left alone for an extended period without proper care and nourishment. The crime scene also showed signs of neglect, with the home in disarray and a lack of evidence that Jaylyn had been properly attended to during Crystal's absence. This case against Crystal Candelario quickly moved through the legal system and, of course, garnered media attention due to the disturbing nature of the charges. During her trial, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of neglect and abandonment, highlighting the 10-day period during which Jalen was left entirely alone. Witnesses, including neighbors and acquaintances, also testified about Crystal's actions and behavior, both before and after the incident. The prosecution argued that Crystal's decision to leave her child alone for such an extended period was a clear case of gross negligence and reckless disregard for Jalen's life. They pointed to the autopsy results, which confirmed that Jalen died from dehydration and malnutrition, conditions that developed over several days. The prosecution also presented evidence that Crystal had left town for a vacation in Detroit, Michigan, and in Puerto Rico, knowing full well that her daughter was alone at home. Crystal's defense attempted to argue that she had not intended for any harm to come to Jalen and that she had left food and water, believing it would be sufficient. They claimed that Crystal was struggling with significant personal issues, including financial stress and mental health challenges, which impaired her judgment. But this argument failed to convince the jury, as the evidence of prolonged neglect and the severity of Jalen's condition were undeniable. Crystal Candelario was found guilty of aggravated murder, endangering children, and other related charges. The judge, noting the egregious nature of the crime and the suffering endured by Jalen, handed down a severe sentence. Crystal was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting the court's condemnation of her actions. How did she take all this? Throughout the trial, Crystal displayed a range of emotions, from apparent remorse to periods of detachment. Her reaction to the verdict was one of visible shock and despair, as she faced the reality of spending the rest of her life in prison. In statements made during her sentencing, Crystal expressed regret and sorrow for her actions, although many observers felt that her remorse came too late and could not undo the tragedy that had occurred. Tatiana Fusari. In the quiet town of Solon Township, Kent County, Michigan, another harrowing story of neglect and tragedy unfolded on August 2, 2018. This was the day that 10-month-old Mary Welch took her last agonizing breath. Baby Mary weighed only 8 pounds when she was found dead in her urine-soaked crib, her small body ravaged by the cruel effects of malnutrition and dehydration. Mary's parents, 28 years old Seth Welch and 29 years old Tatiana Fusari, had been on the radar of Child Protective Services since 2014, when their eldest newborn tested positive for THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, the primary psychoactive component in marijuana, hashish, and other substance cannabis plants. They had blatantly refused to seek medical attention for their daughter, citing religious reasons and a distrust of the healthcare system. As a result, 2 of their 3 children had never even seen a licensed doctor. So nothing was done to them after the THC was found in their eldest child's system in 2014. In addition, Tatiana Fusari was a very unhygienic person, and the conditions inside the family's home were nothing short of horrific. The county sheriff, upon investigating the scene, testified to the presence of vermin, insects, and mold, painting a grim picture of the environment in which these children were forced to exist. After an autopsy on baby Mary, it was revealed that Mary was suffering from chronic malnutrition and starvation, a direct consequence of her parents' callous neglect. The doctor who performed the procedure stated unequivocally that the infant's agonizing demise was caused by the intentional withholding of food and water. Tragically, as mentioned earlier, this was not the first time Child Protective Service had been involved with the family. Their efforts to terminate the parental rights of the couple were a devastating admission of their failure to protect Mary and her siblings from the horrors that ultimately claimed her life. When Fusari faced the judge, the courtroom was filled with tension. Many didn't expect the reaction they got from her as her verdict was read. She was given a fair charge of life sentencing and 15 to 30 years for child abuse. Fusari's face turned red with confusion and shock. Jalissa Thor. Eli was an amazing 6-year-old boy who always woke up full of energy and laughter. This was the statement made in court and during the trial of Jalissa Thor, a mother from Minnesota, who was convicted in 2023 for the murder of her 6-year-old son, Eli Hart. The case drew widespread attention due to its sheer brutality and the disturbing nature of Thaler's actions. Thaler shot her son 9 times with a short gun and left his body in the trunk of her car. The discovery of Eli's body sent shockwaves through the community, but it was Thaler's reaction in court that truly stunned observers. Thaler was arrested in Orono in May 2022, when a caller reported that the car she was driving had a shattered rear window and a blown-out tire. The police spotted her, drove her home, and took the car for inspection. When police officers went to survey the car later that day, they found her son's body in the trunk of the car, leading to her arrest. In January of 2023, a jury convicted her of first and second-degree murder and slammed her with a life sentence. It was an emotional day in court at the sentencing. Eli Hart's family had a framed glass photo of him in the court as they spoke in front of the judge. When Thaler faced the judge, the courtroom was filled with tension. Many expected to see a broken woman, overwhelmed with remorse. Instead, Thaler's demeanor was cold and unyielding. She showed no sign of regret or sorrow. Her face remained a mask of defiance, and she seemed detached from the gravity of her crime. When Thaler was asked if she wanted to address the court, she agreed and said, "I'm innocent. You all. You're garbage." Jalissa Gardner. The air in the courtroom was thick with solemn silence as Judge James Lammy delivered his verdict. Jalissa Gardner, the mother accused of a horrific crime, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. The grim details of that fateful day, July 1st, 2016, sent shockwaves through the community and media. Prosecutors painted a harrowing picture. 2 of the children were found lifeless in a bedroom, while the other 2 met the same tragic fate in the living room, the youngest still strapped in her car seat. Amidst the whole grief, the oldest child, a 7-year-old, had miraculously escaped the death row and rushed to a neighbor, raising the alarm that would ultimately lead to the arrest of this mother. During the trial, the prosecution acknowledged that Gardner did indeed suffer from a mental illness and frustration from motherhood, but they also argued that she understood the gravity of her actions and knew they were wrong. This assertion, coupled with the overwhelming evidence, led to the judge's unwavering decision. Jalissa Gardner, a mother from Tennessee, was convicted in 2016 for the brutal murders of her 4 young children, Talon, Saya, Savi, and Yazi. The details of the crime were harrowing, as Gardner used a knife to end the lives of her innocent children. The youngest victim was just 6 months old. The sheer brutality of Gardner's actions shocked the nation, but it was her reaction in court that left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. When Gardner stood before the judge, the courtroom was charged with tension. She was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, assault by child abuse, and was given a life sentencing with the possibility of parole after 51 years. Many anticipated a display of deep remorse or sorrow from her. Instead, Gardner's demeanor was cold and unyielding. She showed no sign of regret or guilt. Her face remained expressionless, a stark contrast to the horrific nature of her crimes. Shanda Vander Ark. By looking at her outward appearance, one wonders how an innocent and calm-looking woman could commit such an unspeakable crime. This tragic case of child abuse and neglect is truly heart-wrenching. Shanda Vander Ark's callous actions have rightfully earned her a life sentence for the horrific torture and starvation of her 15-year-old son, Timothy Ferguson. During the trial, the court was witness to a chilling display of Vander Ark's depravity when she vomited after being shown photographs of her emaciated son. This visceral reaction only serves to underscore the atrocities she inflicted upon the vulnerable child entrusted to her care. Judge Matthew Casel's scathing words during sentencing perfectly capture the magnitude of Vander Ark's crimes. He did not mince words, describing her actions as torture, a fitting characterization of the systematic abuse, malnutrition, starvation, and neglect that led to Timothy's tragic demise. The additional 50 to 100-year sentence for child abuse further solidifies the justice system's condemnation of Vander Ark's abhorrent behavior. This sentence, coupled with the life imprisonment for murder, ensures that she will face the consequences of her unspeakable actions for the rest of her life. Vaile Bel. In a case that reads like a dark, twisted thriller, Vaile Bel has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murders of her 2 young children and her former husband's wife. The details of this disturbing saga are as baffling as they are horrific. Vaile Bel, a 50-year-old mother from Idaho, was found guilty in May of 2023, killing her 7-year-old son, Joshua, J.J. Vaile, and her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee Ryan, as well as conspiring to kill Tammy Daybell, the previous wife of her 5th husband, Chad Daybell. The judge sentenced her to 3 consecutive life sentences, an appropriate punishment for a woman who committed such unspeakable acts. The investigation into the children's disappearance in 2019 unveiled a dark, bizarre web of beliefs and delusions. Vaile Bel had become entrenched in a religious rabbit hole, convinced that her own children had been taken over by evil spirits and transformed into zombies. She saw it as her divine duty to usher in the apocalypse by eliminating those she deemed threats. Her former friend Melanie Gibb recounted how Vaile Bel believed certain people in her life had been possessed, including her own children. Vaile Bel's own words echoed this delusional worldview, as she claimed she regularly communicates with the spirits of her victims, who have assured her that no one was murdered and that they are happy and busy in the spirit world. Amid this macabre backdrop, the anguish of the victims' loved ones cuts through. JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, spoke of the 136 days since she last embraced her beloved grandson, a preemie with autism whom she and her husband had once cared for. Tammy Daybell's sister, Samantha Gwilliam, lashed out at Vaile Bel's claimed status as an exalted being, condemning her vile actions that tore their family apart. The judge himself was not spared the emotional toll, admitting that the evidence and crime scene photos had left a lasting imprint, stating he would never be able to erase the images of the slain children from his mind. "A parent killing their own children is the most shocking thing that I can imagine," he said. Diane Downs. Diane Downs became infamous for her actions on a tragic night in 1983. Downs was a mother of 3 children, Christy, aged 8, Cheryl, aged 7, and Danny, aged 3. At the time, she was a postal worker living in Springfield, Oregon. She had a shaky marriage, which led to subsequent divorce from Steve Downs. Something significant happened on the night of May 19, 1983. Diane Downs arrived at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital in Springfield with her 3 children, who had been shot at close range. Downs herself had a gunshot wound in her left arm. She told hospital staff and police that a bushy-haired stranger had flagged her down on a rural road, demanded her car, and then shot her and her children. Cheryl, the middle child, was pronounced dead at the hospital. Christy and Danny were severely wounded but survived, though Danny was paralyzed from the waist down, and Christy suffered a stroke that impaired her ability to speak. During the investigation of the bush-haired man, investigators found Downs' story suspicious. Her demeanor was oddly calm and detached for a mother whose children had just been attacked. Plus, forensic evidence and inconsistencies in her account raised further doubts. For example, the blood spatter and ballistic evidence did not align with her version of events. As the investigation progressed, police discovered Downs had a motive. She was infatuated with a former lover, Robert Knickerbocker, who did not want children. So Downs, out of infatuation, believed that by removing her children, she could rekindle their relationship. This chilling motive, combined with the evidence, led to her arrest on February 28, 1984, on charges of murder, attempted murder, and criminal assault. Her trial began in May 1984 and was a media sensation. The prosecution painted a picture of a cold, calculating woman who was willing to kill her children for her own desires. Key evidence included the fact that the gun used in the shooting was never found, but it matched the type of weapon Downs owned. Also, her surviving daughter Christy, who had regained her ability to speak, testified against her mother and provided horrific details of the night of the shooting. In her defense, Her defense team tried to argue that Downs was a loving mother who was also a victim of the attack. They suggested that the police had not adequately investigated other suspects, but the overwhelming evidence and Christie's testimony proved them wrong. On June 17, 1984, Diane Downs was convicted of murder, attempted murder, and assault. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Her reaction in court was one of shock and denial, maintaining her innocence throughout. Her behavior and lack of remorse throughout the trial and sentencing only reinforced the public's perception of her as a remorseless and dangerous individual. Subscribers pick. The image depicts a possibly photoshopped image of one of the most evil mothers reacting to life sentencing in a courtroom setting, shackled and laughing maniacally. While this image is not real, it can evoke discussions about the severe and tragic cases where mothers have brutally murdered their children. Such cases often shock and horrify the public, not only due to the violent acts themselves, but also because of the seemingly disconnected or inappropriate reactions of the perpetrators in court. In many real-life instances, mothers who commit such heinous acts against their children display a range of emotions in court, from apparent indifference to emotional breakdowns. These reactions can highlight underlying issues such as severe mental illness, past trauma, or extreme emotional detachment. The courtroom setting becomes a stark stage where the tragic consequences of these acts are laid bare. Tell us, what do you think about this image? Susan Smith, born on September 26, 1977, in Union, South Carolina. Susan Smith became widely known in 1944 for a heartbreaking and horrifying crime. Smith, then 23 years old, made a desperate 911 call on October 25, 1994, reporting that an African-American man had carjacked her car with her two young sons, 3 years old Michael and 14 months old Alex inside. She claimed the carjacker drove away with her children. This caused panicking and sparked a massive nationwide search and garnering intense media attention. For 9 days, everyone watched in horror as Susan Smith made tearful public pleas for the safe return of her sons. The community rallied around her, and law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to find the missing boys. But something strange started happening to her story: inconsistency. Her story and evidence from the investigation led authorities to suspect her involvement. On the 3rd of November, 1994, Susan Smith confessed to the unthinkable. She admitted that there had been no carjacker. Instead, she had driven her car to John D. Long Lake, removed the parking brake, and let the vehicle roll into the lake, drowning her children trapped inside their car seats. Smith later explained that she was in a troubled relationship and felt her children were an obstacle to her new romance. This confession shocked everyone and transformed public sympathy into outrage. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. During her trial, the prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that her actions were premeditated and cold-blooded. The defense, however, portrayed Smith as a troubled young woman who suffered from severe depression and emotional instability, exacerbated by a history of sexual abuse and a failed marriage. Throughout the trial, the prosecution presented evidence showing how Smith meticulously planned the murders. They highlighted her calculated efforts to cover up the crime with the fabricated carjacking story. The defense countered by bringing in mental health experts who testified about her fragile mental state, arguing that her emotional turmoil had impaired her judgment. On July 22, 1995, the jury found Susan Smith guilty of the murders of her sons. Instead of the intended death sentence, the jury recommended life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This decision was influenced by the defense's portrayal of Smith's mental health issues and the jurors' apparent reluctance to impose the death penalty on a woman. Susan Smith's reaction to her sentencing was one of visible emotional breakdown. In court, she cried and appeared distraught, maintaining that she never intended to harm her children and expressing deep remorse for her actions. Despite this, the gravity of her crime and the loss of her 2 innocent children left an indelible mark on the public consciousness. Megan Huntsman. On the 12th of April 2014, Darren West, Huntsman's estranged husband, was cleaning out the garage of their former home in Pleasant Grove when he discovered a suspicious box. Inside, he found the remains of a newborn baby wrapped in plastic. West immediately contacted the police. They arrived on the scene and conducted a thorough search of the garage. To their horror, they discovered the bodies of 6 more infants, each concealed in a similar manner. Huntsman, who had moved out of the house years earlier, was arrested shortly after the gruesome discovery. During police interviews, she confessed to killing the infants between 1996 and 2006. Huntsman revealed that she had strangled or suffocated each baby shortly after birth and then hid their bodies in boxes in her garage. She claimed that she was heavily addicted to methamphetamine during this period and did not want to care for any more children. Further investigation revealed that Megan Huntsman had managed to hide her pregnancies and the subsequent murders from her family and friends for nearly a decade. Her motive appeared to be rooted in her severe substance abuse problems and her belief that she could not handle more children. The case raised significant questions about how such a series of murders could go unnoticed for so long and the factors that led to Huntsman's horrifying actions. Megan Huntsman was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. The 7th infant was determined to be stillborn and therefore did not result in a murder charge. Huntsman waived her right to a preliminary hearing and pleaded guilty to all charges. During her sentencing on April 20th, 2015, Huntsman expressed remorse for her actions. She stated, "I really feel a lot of remorse for what I've done. I've caused so much pain." The judge sentenced Megan Huntsman to 6 terms of 5 years to life in prison, to be served consecutively. This effectively ensures that she will spend the rest of her life behind bars. The sentence reflected the gravity of her crimes and the need for justice for the 7 innocent lives lost. Huntsman's reaction in court was subdued. She appeared emotionally detached, which contrasted sharply with the magnitude of her actions. The case left an indelible mark on the community of Pleasant Grove and beyond, serving as a grim reminder of the potential for hidden horrors behind closed doors. Angela Alexi. 25-year-old Angela Alexi was found guilty of felony murder and first-degree child abuse in the tragic death of her newborn son, who was found frozen in a recycle bin. The jury, composed of 6 men and 6 women, swiftly reached their verdict in just over an hour, leaving Alexi's defense attorney, Stephen Kaplan, despondent over the outcome. Alexi, a mother of 4, had given birth to her newborn son in the cold garage of her parents' East Point home, only to then leave him there, alone and unprotected. The prosecutor, William Cataldo, argued that this child was not forgotten. This child was knowingly left to die in the garage, Cataldo told the jury during his closing arguments. The defense, led by Kaplan, had attempted to sway the jury towards lesser charges of involuntary manslaughter and second-degree child abuse, arguing that Alexi's actions were not driven by an intent to harm the child. Kaplan claimed that Alexi's 10th grade education and cognitive issues meant she did not fully comprehend the grave consequences of her choices. But the jury did not but that. They remained unconvinced by Alexi's stories and perceived her as lacking credibility and emotional response. The jury foreman, a mother of 2, bluntly questioned, "Why didn't you have the child in the home with the warmth? Why didn't you wrap it up and bring it inside the home?" In a video interrogation shown in court, Alexi herself acknowledged the gravity of her actions, stating, "I think I should be locked up. I don't know for how long. I know I should go away for a while." But Kaplan's defense rested on the argument that Alexi's limited intelligence and maturity prevented her from fully comprehending the risks her actions posed to the child's life. Roseville Police Detective Brad McKenzie, the lead investigator on the case, expressed a bittersweet sentiment about the verdict, stating, "I wish she would have made different decisions. She could have given the baby up and he would have survived." The jury's foreman, speaking on behalf of the panel, emphasized that the decision to convict Alexi on the more serious charges was not taken lightly. She acknowledged the complex factors at play, including Alexi's history of neglect with her other children, which may have influenced the jury's ultimate judgment. She faced a first-degree child abuse in the death of her newborn son, whom she gave birth to in a cold garage, and left there a life sentencing without the possibility of parole was given to her. The child, whom Alexei had planned to name Robert, was later buried at Resurrection Cemetery and given the name Henry Alexander Macomb after the county's namesake, General Alexander Macomb. Her face was red and filled with regrets, but we can turn the hands of time, and justice had to be served. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.